HOA. Karen called the cops on my Rolls Royce. What she didn't know, I am the police chief. It was my first full morning off duty in nearly 2 weeks. I'd just finished a brutal string of overnight shifts, drugs, domestic disputes, a carjacking, and one armed standoff that ended with more paperwork than I thought humanly possible. But it was over. And this day was for me. I took the Phantom out for a sunrise spin. There's something about driving a Rolls Royce just after dawn. The streets are quiet, the engine purrs like it's reading your mood, and every stoplight reflection dances across that obsidian-black finish, like it knows it was meant to be admired. I didn't buy this car to flex. I bought it because for 30 years I hadn't lived for myself. Not really. I'd been in the line of fire, literally and figuratively, more times than I cared to count. And after being appointed police chief, I figured one indulgence was fair. A reward, a symbol. The apartment complex I'd moved into was luxury, no doubt. A modern fortress nestled on the edge of a gated community with rooftop gardens, a concierge lobby, and a glass-paneled gym that overlooked the skyline. My unit was on the 14th floor. Corner view, dual balcony, and peace. Real peace. Or so I thought. The first note appeared 3 days after I moved in. It was handwritten, neat cursive, lavender paper, folded once and tucked under my windshield wiper like some passive-aggressive invitation. I thought it was a flyer at first. Dear resident, we strive to maintain a community of respectful harmony. Your recent vehicle selection, while impressive, may be disruptive to the aesthetic cohesion of our parking area. Kindly consider using a car cover. Warmly, a concerned neighbor. I remember actually laughing. I thought it was a joke, a prank by one of my guys from the department. But no. The concierge confirmed it had been handed to security by a lady in beige slacks with a clipboard and a strong perfume. They gave me her unit number without hesitation. Everyone already knew her name. Karen. Now, I've dealt with my fair share of difficult personalities, especially in uniform. But HOA Karens are a different breed. The kind of people who weaponize rules, twist bylaws like knives, and act like power was assigned to them by divine decree. At first, I ignored it. One note wasn't worth a confrontation. But then came the violation slips. Printed and official-looking, these notices were left taped to my door. One cited inappropriate vehicle prominence, another listed excessive driveway reflection hazard, and one even claimed unauthorized aesthetic disruption to communal design language. I had no idea what that meant, but it sounded made up. Because it was. I looked into it. There was no clause, no article, no bylaw in the HOA handbook that said anything about luxury cars being banned or needing to be covered. And even if there were, this wasn't some 1950s neighborhood with manicured clones of beige sedans. The guy 2 spots down had a tricked-out Jeep with LED underglow, and the woman next to him drove a canary yellow Porsche with pink rims. But they weren't being targeted. Only me. And it wasn't just about the car. It was me, the uniform in civvies, the outsider in the penthouse who didn't attend the monthly meetings and didn't kiss the ring. That's when the notes turned to warnings. One night, as I returned from a late dinner, I found a group of residents whispering near the elevator. Karen stood in the center, arms crossed like a mall cop on caffeine. The second she saw me, the whispering stopped. I nodded politely. Evening. She squinted at me, eyes zeroing in on my keys, which gleamed with the Royce logo. Her lips tightened. You're the one with the noise machine? She asked. Excuse me? The car. It's offensive. You might enjoy attention, but the rest of us moved here for serenity. I stared for a moment, then smiled. It's electric. You could hear a golf cart from further away. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. This isn't about the engine, Chief. It's about image. You think you're above this place. But there are rules, and the board takes image very seriously. I gave her a calm nod. Well, I take harassment seriously, and I know the handbook front to back. There's nothing in it about image policing. Maybe there should be, but as of today, my car stays. She didn't flinch, just gave me the kind of look that said this isn't over. She was right. 3 days later, it escalated. I was downstairs grabbing coffee when I noticed 2 uniformed officers outside. Not mine, local patrol. One of them was peering through the Rolls tinted window. The other was holding his phone up to record, confused and clearly annoyed. I stepped out. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" They turned. One recognized me immediately. "Chief?" I nodded. We got a call about a suspicious vehicle parked illegally on private property," the younger officer said, scratching his head. "Caller claimed it might be stolen, possibly tied to a local gang." I almost laughed. "She say it was matte black, custom wheels, front dash camera?" He blinked. "Yeah, actually." I pulled out my badge and ID. "It's mine." The senior officer, who hadn't said much, stepped forward. "Sorry, Chief. We thought it was weird, too. Plate came back clean. Didn't realize you lived here." She say who she was. Wouldn't give her name. Sounded agitated. Female, mid-50s. Kept saying she had connections on the board. I thanked them, shook hands, and watched as they got back in their cruiser and drove off. I stood there for a long moment. The sun had risen behind the building, casting a clean shadow over the Phantom. I could see my reflection in the polished side door, tired, calm, but no longer amused. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't petty. It was war. Karen didn't take the police visit well. The very next morning, I found a fresh HOA violation notice on my door. This one laminated. The bold red letters at the top screamed, "Second notice, non-compliant vehicle presence." Below that, a paragraph that was almost laughable in its absurdity. Residents are reminded that visual pollution is a serious concern for our community's mental well-being. The ongoing presence of overly reflective, luxury-class vehicles may contribute to discomfort, intimidation, or a hostile atmosphere for fellow tenants. Continued violations will result in board action. Visual pollution? I'd heard it all now. I scanned the signature at the bottom. Karen M. Thatcher, Interim Aesthetic Compliance Chair. They gave her a title. She'd invented a role, and the board let her print letters with it. This wasn't just one woman's vendetta anymore. It was a creeping infection, a quiet restructuring of neighborhood power. Karen wasn't trying to get rid of my car. She was trying to get rid of me. Over the next week, I began documenting everything. Every note, every flyer, every complaint. I filed it all, complete with timestamps, photos, and statements from neighbors who were either sympathetic or flat out embarrassed by her behavior. One woman on the 8th floor, Mrs. DeSoto, told me Karen had visited her unit at 7 a.m., asking her to co-sign a formal complaint. She said the car gave her countryside jitters, whatever that means, the old woman whispered. Others weren't so amused. A middle-aged couple across from the garden-level units pulled me aside one afternoon. "She's targeting you," the husband said bluntly. "We heard her at the meeting last night. Called you a flashy outsider who thinks he can buy respect. She's rallying votes to ban street view luxury cars altogether. She's jealous," his wife added. "Everyone knows it. You moved in, respectful, quiet, generous. But you didn't play her game." I nodded. "And what game is that?" She didn't miss a beat. Fear. The next HOA meeting was in the Sky Lounge, a wide echo-filled room with glass walls that overlooked the courtyard. Normally, these gatherings were sparsely attended. That night, it was packed. People brought folding chairs. A few stood in the back. Karen had that effect. She sat at the head of the table like she owned the place, clipboard in hand, pearls at her neck, smugness radiating off her like heat from an idling engine. When I entered, she glanced up and gave me the smile of someone already celebrating a victory. "Ah, Chief," she said sweetly, her voice raised for effect. "Glad you could make time for the community." I gave a short nod and took a seat in the second row. The meeting began with routine complaints: someone's dog barking at night, a clogged trash chute, low water pressure in Tower C. Then Karen cleared her throat and announced the real agenda. "As acting chair of aesthetic compliance," she began, "I'd like to propose a motion for vehicle classification standards, ensuring that all visible automobiles conform to the modest and unified image that our community values." There were murmurs. I caught Evelyn Porter's eyes, a retired judge and longtime board member, who looked less than thrilled. Karen pressed on. "This motion includes a ban on hyper-luxury brands being parked in shared lots unless covered. Bentley, Ferrari, Maserati, Rolls Royce, among others. Residents who fail to comply would be subject to progressive fines. These vehicles, while impressive, send a message of elitism and imbalance. We are a community, not a showroom." A few heads nodded. Most didn't move, but the silence was enough for Karen to feel momentum. Then she opened her folder and held up a photo. It was my Rolls, taken in the golden light of sunset. It looked beautiful, too beautiful, maybe. "This car," she said, holding it high like evidence in a courtroom, "has been the subject of multiple complaints. I've personally fielded at least 9 objections from concerned neighbors, all expressing discomfort, anxiety, and even fear." She let that sit for a beat. Do we want a community where people feel judged? Where extravagance overshadows comfort? That was her pitch, and for a moment, I almost stood up. But Evelyn beat me to it. "Miss Thatcher," she said, voice cutting through the room like cold steel, "this board does not pass motions based on envy or preference. We pass motions based on law, logic, and fairness. Your proposed ban? It's discriminatory. Period." The room shifted. People murmured louder now. Karen's face twitched. "I'm not attacking anyone, Evelyn. I'm advocating for the greater good. You're targeting a resident because of what he drives. That's not governance. That's a grudge." I stayed quiet. That's what made it worse. When the vote was finally called, Karen's motion failed, 4-1. Hers was the only vote in favor. Afterward, as the crowd filtered out, she brushed past me without a word. Her perfume lingered longer than she did. I thought that would be the end. It wasn't. Over the next month, things escalated in subtle, deliberate ways. Anonymous noise complaints began flooding the security desk, always during times I wasn't even home. Someone accidentally scratched the passenger side of the Rolls with a set of keys. My parking spot was mysteriously repainted overnight with incorrect borders, forcing me to park diagonally just to fit. And then came the cameras. I noticed the first one tucked behind a potted plant near the elevator. The second was inside a smoke detector in the parking garage. None of them were HOA sanctioned. I had them removed and filed a report with building security. When confronted, Karen denied all involvement. "You sound paranoid," she said, eyes glinting. "That car must be getting to you." But I wasn't rattled. I was focused. I called in a favor from an old friend, someone in digital surveillance who owed me a bottle of bourbon and a few favors. He swept the area. Found a third device inside a hallway vent facing my door. That was all I needed. I scheduled a private meeting with Evelyn and 2 other board members. I laid out everything: my documentation, the surveillance devices, the security reports, even the police log from the day Karen called in a false stolen vehicle report. Evelyn was livid. "We'll handle this," she promised. "Enough is enough." 3 days later, Karen was suspended from the board pending investigation, and that's when the story hit the press. Somehow, someone leaked the internal board memo about the investigation. A small neighborhood blog picked it up. HOA chair accused of harassment against police chief. The story got a few hundred shares. Then a local news site picked it up. Then it went viral. Suddenly, Karen was the face of petty HOA abuse. Comment sections were filled with memes, jokes, and outrage. Karen versus the Rolls became a trending TikTok audio. Someone even made a parody Instagram account for my car, giving it snarky captions like, "Too shiny for Karen's soul." Karen went into hiding. She sent a formal complaint to the board accusing me of defamation and media manipulation. The board dismissed it unanimously. She filed a civil complaint. That was dismissed too, lack of evidence. And just like that, the woman who tried to erase me became the most famous symbol of suburban tyranny in the state. But I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I knew something others didn't. Karen wasn't gone. People like her never really leave. They regroup. They plot. They re-enter through side doors while no one's looking. And just when the community began to relax, a new name appeared in the meeting notes, Brandon Ellis. Title: HOA Community Liaison Consultant. Brandon Ellis was everything Karen wasn't: slick, polished, and calm under pressure. Where she used brute force and fear, he used suggestion and charm. But the goal was the same: control. The first time I met him, he was standing next to my car. Not close enough to be rude, but just near enough that I noticed the deliberate inspection. He had a clipboard, of course he did, and wore a custom-tailored navy suit that looked more Wall Street than suburban HOA. "Chief," he said smoothly as I approached. "Beautiful vehicle. Quite the presence." I studied him for a second. His watch alone could pay a year's worth of HOA dues. "Thanks," I replied. "Something I worked hard for." He nodded as if we were on the same team. "Absolutely. Hard work deserves recognition." He gestured toward the building. "Mind if I walk with you? I'm Brandon Ellis. The board brought me in as a consultant, mostly to smooth things over after, well, everything." I let him walk beside me. We reached the elevator and rode up in silence until he said, "There's a lot of tension in this building, Chief. I know it didn't start with you, but your, let's say, visibility hasn't helped." I turned slightly. "My visibility?" Brandon smiled politely, like he was gently scolding a toddler. "You're a public official with a high-end car and a reputation. Residents talk. Some admire it. Some feel uneasy. It's the kind of imbalance that makes people question whether they belong." There it was again, that word, imbalance. Karen's favorite justification. Do they feel uneasy about the Porsche with pink rims? Or the guy with the lifted Hummer on 37-inch tires? I asked. He gave a soft chuckle. "It's not the same." "You're right," I said. "They didn't call the police on those cars." Brandon's smile faltered. "I'm not here to assign blame, just to keep things smooth." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I already knew what he was doing, testing boundaries, trying to find cracks in the wall. And when he didn't find any, he moved on to other tactics. Over the following weeks, Brandon became a fixture in the building. He showed up at community events, handed out surveys, hosted inclusive image workshops. He never once mentioned Karen's name, but every policy he proposed echoed hers. New guidelines were suggested for the parking structure, emphasizing visual uniformity, discouraging excessively reflective finishes, and encouraging modesty in communal aesthetics. There were whispers of a voluntary compliance incentive, $50 off your dues if your car matched the visual harmony of the community. The Phantom, of course, was never mentioned by name, but everyone knew. Brandon was using politics, not war. What he didn't count on was Evelyn, The retired judge watched all of it with icy precision. Every time Brandon submitted a new proposal, she requested it be added to public records. When he asked to speak off the record with residents, she demanded written summaries. When he suggested small amendments to the bylaws, she invited legal review. And when he finally tried to push a motion to create a new HOA subcommittee, the Visual Standards Board, Evelyn stopped him cold. "We don't need a new board, Mr. Ellis," she said at the monthly meeting. "We need new ideas, ones that aren't recycled from a woman who tried to turn our building into a dictatorship." There was silence. Brandon glanced around the room, waiting for someone to come to his defense. No one did. I could have spoken. I could have used my position, my experience, my voice. But I didn't. Instead, I did something better. I invited the community to a party, a barbecue, to be exact. It started small, a few flyers in the elevators, a post on the building's digital notice board. Nothing flashy. Just a casual weekend gathering in the courtyard. But word spread, and by the time Saturday rolled around, we had over 60 RSVPs. I spent the morning prepping ribs and smoked brisket. Some of the neighbors brought sides, drinks, desserts. One guy brought a karaoke machine. Another, a bubble machine for the kids. I rolled the Phantom into the center of the courtyard, cleaned, waxed, spotless. Not to brag, but because it belonged. It was part of this neighborhood, not an outsider, not a threat, just another thing someone had worked for. When the sun began to set, I stepped up with a microphone. The smell of grilled food hung in the air, mixed with laughter and soft music. Kids ran around the fountain. Elderly couples shared folding chairs. The Phantom reflected the string lights above like a chandelier on wheels. "Neighbors," I began. "I moved here for the same reasons many of you did. Peace, quiet, and a sense of community. But what I didn't expect was how quickly fear could replace friendliness, how easily control could be disguised as concern." I paused. I've been called flashy, intimidating, disruptive, not because of anything I've said or done, but because of what I drive. And I know many of you have felt that kind of scrutiny in smaller ways. A note about your balcony plants, a warning about your guest's car, a fine for wind chimes. Laughter and murmurs rippled through the crowd. But this building, this community, became better when people started talking, listening, and standing up. Not for rules, but for reason. I turned slightly, looking toward Brandon, who stood stiffly near the courtyard's edge. This isn't about a car, or a person. It's about respect. And I think we're ready to choose it again. Applause broke out, not loud, but steady, real. Brandon didn't speak that night. He left early. 2 days later, the board received his resignation. No explanation, no public memo, just a one-line email and a silence that spoke volumes. The policies he proposed were shredded before the ink dried. Evelyn took over as interim HOA chair until a new election. She asked me to run. I declined. One Karen was enough. I didn't want to become what I fought. Instead, I helped draft a new code of conduct for board members, one that required transparency, resident feedback, and public access to decision-making. We added a rule, unofficial but unanimously supported. No clipboards allowed at barbecues. A year passed. Karen never returned. Her lawsuit withered in court, strangled by contradictions and a complete lack of support. The judge threw it out with a single line. The court finds no merit in the plaintiff's emotional distress due to someone else's car. The Phantom still sat in my same spot. Still shining, still mine. And more than ever, it wasn't about the car. It was about what it represented. I began noticing things. More neighbors upgraded their cars, subtly, then boldly. A teacher bought a used BMW she'd been saving for. A young couple started parking their restored Camaro front and center instead of hiding it in guest parking. People stopped apologizing for what they loved. And something beautiful happened. Conversations bloomed. Community events doubled. People started organizing cleanups, holiday contests, even a building newsletter. Not because anyone told them to, but because they finally felt like they belonged. One evening, a new resident, a shy, soft-spoken man in his early 30s, knocked on my door. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "I just moved in, Unit 1210. I heard you're, the guy with the Phantom?" I smiled. "Guilty." He looked relieved. "Just wanted to say thanks. I read the article. My last building had a Karen, too. But this place, it feels different." "It is," I said. "But it wasn't always." He nodded. "Well, it's better now." I closed the door after he left, then glanced at the Phantom outside. Sometimes power isn't about force or title. It's not about the badge on your chest or the emblem on your hood. It's about knowing exactly who you are and never letting anyone write your story for you. So if you ever move into a place like mine and someone leaves a folded note on your windshield, don't get angry. Get ready. Because behind that note is a challenge, a question. Will you fold? Or will you stand still, shining, silent, and unshakable? I know what I did. And that's why the Rolls Royce still sits there, uncovered, unapologetic, untouchable,